Brandon Sanderson has responded to the numerous criticisms being sent his way for not only promoting the evil LGBTQ plus lifestyle, but doing so where it is shown as something good when that is obviously not the case. That is objectively wrong. Under no circumstances can homosexual activity, especially homosexual acts, be tolerated. So, John De La Rose wrote this up over at fandompulse.com. You can find the link in the description below. Encourage you to head on over there, become a paid subscriber. It costs less than a Starbucks coffee, just $5 a month, and you get all kinds of content like this. So let's get into this here. If you don't know what's going on in the latest book that Brandon Sanderson published, Wind in Truth, he includes a gay romance between two men promoted in the book as if it is a positive lifestyle instead of the sin that it is. Moreover, it's noted the scenes are forced and out of place in a medieval fantasy setting where it feels ham-fisted and modern. When in Truth comes after a blog post updating his stance on LGBTQ, as Sanderson has gone from a devout Mormon who refused to include such evils in his books to putting them as background characters in the Stormlight Archive series to acknowledge they exist to now actively promoting the sinful lifestyles. He did this back, this is the blog post in 2023. It's like part of some FAQ that he has here, and he makes it very clear what his stance is. He says, my current stance is one of unequivocal support for LGBTQ plus rights. I support gay marriage, I support trans rights, the rights of non-binary people, and I support the rights of trans people to affirm their own identity with love and support. I support anti-discrimination legislation, and I've voted consistently along these lines for the last 15 years. I am marking the posting of this FAQ item at the encouragement of several of my LGBTQ plus fans with a sizable donation to the Utah Pride Center and Center to the Out Foundation. So that's what he posted in 2023. John included this here, obviously, in the article. And then obviously we get to this latest thing that he has published here over on his blog, brandonsanderson.com. You can see it's titled On Renarin and Relaine. Posted this just a couple days ago and included an image of a stained glass window burning. And obviously, I'm not sure exactly if this has anything to do with the Stormlight Archive. The stained glass window does. Clearly, these two characters does, but the imagery is telling, right? Church is burning while he's promoting this homosexuality. And it's a very lengthy blog post here. The gist of it is basically Tracy Hickman, who wrote Dragonlance with Margaret Weiss, wrote this other book series called The Rose of the Prophet. And in that series, there is a homosexual character. And so he did it in the 80s, so there's nothing wrong with me doing it now. It's utterly ridiculous. And he points to Tracy Hickman also being a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints, also being a Mormon. But from what I understand, now I haven't read Rose of the Prophet. I have read the Dragonlance books. I'm not familiar with Rose of the Prophet. I have looked at some AI kind of summaries of it. And from what the AI says is that main character lives a chaste life. He does not actually engage in this any kind of homosexual activity, which Sanderson says the text made very clear his orientation and included a same-sex romantic plotline. But if you maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but based on what I've seen about this book, that the main character who has same-sex attraction does not actually act upon it. So does not actually engage in the sin of sodomy at all. Anyway, so Sanderson uses that to kind of say like, well, he did it, so I can do it too, right? It's the age-old like, well, if he jumps off a bridge, aren't you going to jump off a bridge too? It's utterly ridiculous, illogical, not rational whatsoever. And this kind of really exposes who Brandon Sanderson is at this time now. His mind is clouded, his intellect is dimmed, and it's all because he is embracing sin. He's embracing sin. And then he goes on to talk about a Sherlock Holmes novel by Arthur Conan Doyle. He says, to my surprise, I found in a study in Scarlet a rather bad and inaccurate portrayal of my religion and the history around it. It was a shockingly weak section and otherwise excellent story. I realized something that day. Authors write for a lot of reasons, and I'm not one to pick which reasons are better or worse. But in my case, I wanted to do as Tracy had done and try my best to portray people different from myself with care, attention, and respect. I came out of the Rose of the Prophet series feeling extremely grateful to Tracy for trying his best to be the person who expressed what I feel is the soul of New Testament teachings, love, and empathy. So this is where Brandon Sanderson goes completely off the rails. He's trying to couch what he's doing as empathy. What he's actually doing is a false empathy because he's trying to actually portray sin as something good, just, and right. And he's doing that in his Wind and Truth book. This is absolutely not true. Bishop Fulton Sheen here breaks this down and explains what false compassion is in the 16th episode of his extraordinarily popular Life is Worth Living television show. Let's just take a listen to what he has to say.
False compassion, which is gradually growing in this country, is a pity that is shown not to the mugged, but to the mugger. Not to the family of the murdered, but to the murderer. Not to the woman who was raped, but to the rapist. Not to the poor girl who's given a shot of dope, but to the rich boy who happens to come from a fine family. There are some judges, some in some of our courts. There are some social workers, not all. There are sob sisters. There are the social slobberers who insist on compassion being shown to the muggers, to the dope fiends, to the throat slashers, to the beatniks, to the prostitutes, to the homosexuals, to the punks. So that today the decent man is practically off the reservation.
So there you go. Obviously, Fulton Sheen, Venerable Fulton Sheen, it's very clear what's going on here. And that's exactly what Brandon Sanderson is doing. If you actually want to listen to more of that, he notes that it all started with literature. And that's exactly what Brandon Sanderson is doing. He's kind of carrying on that tradition, right, of this false compassion being extended to degenerate lifestyles, things that are wrong and evil, and trying to prompt them up as something good. And it has led to massive societal decline. One only needs to just kind of look around to see how far society has fallen, even since the 1960s, when Venerable Fulton Sheen, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, was televising his show there. But anyway, let's go back to Brandon Sanderson here. He says, if I want people to use empathy, research, and respect when they write about someone like myself, unlike what Mr. Doyle did, then I need to do the same for everyone I write about. Because of this, those have become my ideals, empathy and respect. Except he's not actually embracing empathy. He's embracing a false empathy, right? It's a fake empathy. It's not actually true because he's providing empathy to something that is evil. And evil should not be tolerated at all, let alone be given empathy. That's just not the Christian way. Anyways, he goes on and says, when I approach a character, particularly a primary viewpoint protagonist, I don't look at the larger political spectrum. I look at the individual needs of that specific character. I speak to primary sources who are similar to my character in many ways. I do my research and learn how people want to be portrayed, right? He says, I learn how people want to be portrayed, but then he says he's not looking at the larger political spectrum, but he's talking about people who are basically pushing this whole political idea of representation. That's exactly what he's saying without saying it. I mean, this guy is just twisting words. I think he's lying to himself. He's obviously been led astray by the people he surrounded himself with. He needs to probably cut some of those people out of his life that are leading him down this path and get back to finding people who are going to lead him back down the narrow path through the narrow gate that God calls us to go through. That is what I think. That's what I think is happening here. Because he didn't used to think this way. You go back to 2007, he was criticizing J.K. Rowling for making Dumbledore a homosexual after all the books had been published in like a publicity tour. He was saying that's utterly ridiculous. He disagreed with that, and he says that you shouldn't be portraying that in books. And he said he wouldn't be doing that. Well, what is he doing now, right? 17 years later, look what he's doing. I try to get inside the character's head this way and do my best to represent them in a genuine, respectful way because that is how I want to be treated. I want to live in a world where we always give each other the benefit of the doubt. If that is to be the case, I must make efforts to do that myself. So the issue here is this guy has completely lost the idea of any kind of justice, right? He doesn't know what justice is. He's not thinking about justice at all anymore. And that's why he's buying into all of this kind of lovey-dovey fake empathy. It's not my place to tell people how to respond to my work. This post isn't here to attempt to do so. It's absolutely what it is. You're absolutely trying to tell people to act the way that you're acting, to follow this false empathy. You are totally trying to get people to act that way. Like, let's be real. Like, again, lying to yourself. And then you're lying to us, too. However, because of my faith, I know that some of you out there might be experiencing some of the same confusion that I did as a young man, wondering about us and them. Others of you out there may be confused why this post is even necessary, since the fact that gay people exist indicates that merely including them and their lives and stories shouldn't be controversial. But that's not what you're doing, right? You weren't including gay people in your story just because they happen to be there. You were literally promoting it as something good. That's what you were doing. You weren't just including them. If you were going to include them, you should have included them being chaste. You should have included them recognizing that living that kind of lifestyle is wrong, repenting from it, and living a chaste life. That is what you should have been doing. And I don't think you would be getting the criticisms that you are getting now if that is what you had done. But that's not what you had done. You are promoting it as something good. Still, I feel it important to explain, as my entire professional life, I've tried to pull back the curtain regarding my process, so I aim these words toward those of you on the more conservative end who genuinely wish to know what is going on inside my head, and I wouldn't mind when these discussions appear if you link to this post to give at least some nuance to the conversations. I do consider myself an ally to LGBT plus people, and you can find more on my feelings on that elsewhere. Obviously, we went over that. However, that's not why I wrote Renarin is gay. I wrote Renarin the way I did, multifaceted with a great number of things making up who he is, because I wanted to try seeing through his eyes, and if I was going to do so, I needed to do it well. That is something I consider to be an artistic mandate. I also consider it a religious one, as I best relate to the teachings of Christ in the context of trying to understand my neighbor. Again, this guy is literally living the false compassion. Like, you cannot make this stuff up. I encourage you to watch that entire episode of Fulton Sheen. He absolutely talks about the Christ's commandment to love thy neighbor and how it applies to the false compassion. Because again, what is he doing, right? He's not feeling compassion for the readers that are now subjected to him reading his books and now seeing as homosexuality as a positive. That's a fake. He's not thinking about that. He's not thinking about that at all. He's only thinking about, how can I make gay people look better? And he thinks that's how he's understanding his neighbor in that fashion. A total false compassion. It's the same, right? You're feeling the compassion for the rapist rather than the victim, right? And the people that are being victimized are the people that read his books by him promoting this stuff now, who you would have expected that he's not someone who's going to do this. And he's victimized them. I created Renarin as a character long before this was as much of a hot button issue as it is now. That's absolutely not true. This has always been a hot button issue. Even if you go back 20 years, it's been a hot button issue. So he's just totally lying to himself, lying to us. It's sick, dude. This guy has totally lost his moral compass. It's completely pointing south now because he's surrounded himself with people who have twisted his mind, dimmed his intellect. A time when I leaned a different direction politically. This was always going to be his path. I long for the days where not every choice had to be a statement, but maybe that world never existed. Maybe there will always be an instinct to divide the world into the us and them. I was very capable of doing that by myself back in the 80s with no internet or social media to spur me on. It's true. That's the nature of the world, right? It is meant to divide us. The way to unify us is to follow Christ, right? And that's not what he's doing right now. He's doing the opposite. He's the one doing the division. So let me just say this. Renarin's story in these books is the one I wanted to tell for him from the beginning. I don't believe this at all. I'm not trying to indoctrinate or placate. That's exactly what you're trying to do. I'm not trying to do it, but that's what I did. Nor is doing things like this a recent development for me. I put the first openly gay men into the Wheel of Time book back over a decade ago. I don't even remember that. If he did, it just shows that this guy has always been a bad actor. I don't remember that in Wheel of Time. I've only read through those books once, and those are really lengthy books. I do not remember that at all. because I felt it was who they were as expressed in Mr. Jordan's notes. So this guy is like super woke now, right? Like this is what these woke ideologues do. I can do it better than them. I know what he meant to do. This is what the Rings of Power people were saying about J.R. Tolkien. This is Brandon Sanderson. This is who Brandon Sanderson is. There's probably a reason why he was consulting on the Wheel of Time television show and why it was so bad. That I think it, like, as much as he was criticizing the show afterwards, one has to wonder how much of his own notes were put into the show. Now, my plan was for Renard to be gay when I wrote Way of Kings Prime in 2002. So he was trying to promote homosexuality, he's saying, back in 2002. I just don't believe that. And he doesn't provide any evidence of that either, right? We just have to take him at his word, even though he lied throughout this entire post. Why? Because my stories are the way I explore the world and the way I understand the people in it. And this is the way that I attempt to achieve one of my primary goals in life, that of learning to be more empathetic. Well, he's not, right? He's learning a false empathy, as I've said over and over again. But that is what Brandon Sanderson had to say here. John just absolutely excoriates him. Here's the AI stuff that John even shared. He says here, in the fantasy novel The Rose of the Prophet by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, there are no explicitly stated gay characters. However, some readers interpret certain characters and plot points as hinting at same-sex attraction, particularly considering the cultural context of the story where homosexuality is not openly discussed or accepted. So it might be Brandon Sanderson literally reading into that and then using his own interpretation of the book to justify him doing it, right? I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. Like I said, his intellect has been dimmed. And then John has some really good quotes in here from the New Testament. He talks about Corinthians here. Or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. Empathy with sin is not something that should be desired nor encouraged. Romans 12:9 is explicit in saying, abhor what is evil, hold fast to what is good. Absolutely correct. So Brandon Sanderson is quadrupling down on this, and I think it's only going to expose more people to kind of who he is now as a person, what he is all about, and I think it's going to not only harm him financially, but it's clearly harming him spiritually as well. So we should pray for this guy as much as we should oppose him. I don't think you should be buying any of his books anymore, but you should keep this guy in your prayers because he is clearly spiraling. He's clearly being led down a very dark, evil path. But let me know what you guys make of Brandon Sanderson here and his latest response to, or his latest defense of not only including homosexual and transgender characters, but showing them as good in his Wind and Truth book. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, and to always, always speak the truth.